So this is part 2 of Analyzing as Done Unto You by Dr. Andrew Hodges. And before I get into more of his analysis of her writing and her email, I just want to set the context of when she was writing it and what exactly was going on in this particular point in time is very important in understanding why it's significant, everything that how she's written it and what she's written, or the order she puts it in and what she says. So you can get her original email here, as well as other documents on truejustice.org. They have all the documents and evidence from this case. So we know here that she wrote this email and sent it out to about 25 different people, all kinds of people, not necessarily people that she spoke to regularly, just whoever she had in her email on November 4th at 3:24 a.m. So basically the night of November 3rd. And Meredith was murdered on the late evening of November 1st. From Wikipedia, you can read that on the 1st of November is All Saints' Day in Italy, a public holiday. So the last sighting of Meredith Kircher was at 8:45 p.m. on November 1st. So then she was found the following morning on November 2nd. That's when all of this unfolded. So November 2nd. So this email wrote at 3:00 in the morning on November 4th is more akin to, again, November 3rd evening. So it's really the next day, basically. But this wasn't her first email she sent out. She had earlier written to her boyfriend on Facebook on the evening or the afternoon. I think it says 12 p.m. It's kind of difficult to read, but you can see it says November 2nd. So the same day that they found Meredith's body, the police found Meredith's body, and Amanda wrote this message to her boyfriend. Can't talk much, but I woke up this morning, so it's the same day, and I went home from spending the night at a friend's. Now, this man she's writing to, this Andrew Sieber, that's her boyfriend who was living in a foreign country. I don't remember where now. But so she spent the night with Raphael on November 1st evening. And she says she woke up November 2nd and went home and found Meredith, or found the door locked, is her story. But then she writes that, so then they find Meredith's body. Everybody is called to the police station. That evening, she writes to her boyfriend from home, who's in another foreign country, and says, "Oh yeah, I spent the night at a friend's house. And when I came home, I found my roommate murdered." So she claims that she found Meredith murdered, she's telling him. So that's not the official story, though. The official story is she came home and found, drops of blood and found her door locked. But she officially, Amanda left it to the Philomena, her boyfriend, and the police to open the door and find Meredith's body. So if we were to believe the official story, the official narrative that they want to push, that Amanda wants to push, claiming she's innocent, she would never have written that same night saying, "I found her body murdered." So she's giving herself away already, saying that she found her friend murdered. She doesn't say, "I found that my friend was murdered last night." She says, "I found my roommate murdered in her bedroom." And then she says, "I've been at the police office for 14 hours straight, and I have to return in 4. I'll let you know the details later because I'm exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically, and well in every way. I'll let you know as soon as I can. Ti voglio bene, Amanda." So Ti voglio bene means "I love you" in Italian, which Amanda learned from Raphael, the man she actually spent the night with. She lied about here and said it was a friend. So it's just like, it shows you the character of this woman, this young woman. She spends the night with one guy, she's an Italian man, she's, fooling around with and doing drugs with, learns how to say I love you in Italian, and then she murders her roommates with him. And then that night, she writes to her other boyfriend here very next night after murdering her roommate, and says, "Oh, I'm exhausted. I found her. I'll let you know more later. I love you." So it just shows you the characteristic and the manipulativeness of this woman, and how cold and calculating she was. And as many witnesses there attest to, that she was very cool, cold, and calculating. And it shows in her behavior and her messaging here. Less than 24 hours after finding her, after her roommate had been murdered, after she murdered her. So this was the first email they have. Again, November 2nd, the same night, same day as they found Meredith's body. And then the very next day after that, the evening of November 3rd, going into November 4th at 3 a.m., this is when she sends the major email, 5-page email to everybody she has in her address book. Now, it's important to remember, she was not like responding to questions. No one at this point, the evening of November 3rd, no one knew that her name, she was not in the press. No one was writing about her. No one knew who she was. And you can go back. I did a search, looking at the news articles that came out between November 2nd and November 4th here. And the news did break about Meredith being murdered. This was on November 3rd, 2007. But all it says is that Meredith Kircher was found murdered. It does not mention Amanda's name or Raphael or Rudy Gaudet. Believed all three of them were involved. This was the first story. It came out November 2nd, the day her body was discovered. But there's no mention of Amanda or Raphael. So people that Amanda is writing to in Seattle, Washington, mainly, they're not going to have heard about this. They're going to have no idea what's going on. They're not following local news in Perugia, Italy. Now, and that's a different story, maybe in Britain or Ireland, where they did carry the story because it was a British student. But again, they only mentioned Meredith's name and maybe a quote from one of her parents who had just found out what happened. And they were just saying that they're going to, fly over to Italy to confirm. They said, we'll have to go there and identify her. So that was it. It was only Meredith in the news. It was only in Europe and Britain. It was not a big story. It was not an international story. So all the people that Amanda was writing to, they would have had no idea what she was talking about. But it looks like, knowing how controlling and manipulative Amanda was and is, I would assume still is, she knew that the story was breaking. She wasn't mentioned in it yet, but she knew she would be, no doubt. So it looks like she was trying to get ahead of the narrative here with her friends back home, or her people who knew her in America. So it looks like she was kind of running interference here, saying, look, this is the story. And again, as we said in the last video, she sent this email to almost 30 people. Most of them probably she barely even knew. And she's like, here's the story. I was here and then this happened and I don't remember anything or whatever. It goes through the email, which Dr. Andrew Hodges is going to analyze for her unconscious messaging here, super intel. But, it's important. So none of these people had any idea, like, what is this, And so Amanda was not under any pressure, not outwardly. There was no outside pressure for her. She was not a suspect yet. She was still just a person, like all of Meredith's friends. They were all being questioned at the police. They all spent 12, 14 hours at the police station. They all just sit around waiting to be questioned. So Amanda was not a suspect. There's no pressure on her outwardly, any outside influence to do this, write this long explanation. But she was under pressure, as Dr. Hodges points out, because she was in the prison of the mind. She had just gone through a traumatic event, of her murdering her friend, and I guess which was not anticipated initially. Things got out of control, apparently, according to Dr. Hodges from deciphering her email and other writing. So it looks like Amanda was in that prison of the mind. She was replaying events over and over again in her mind. Just everything that happened, from the seeing Meredith to hearing her scream, everything that happened, she's going to be replaying that over and over and over. And that's why I think she wrote in her message that same night. She said, "I'm exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically, in every way." She's not exhausted because of her friend, because she doesn't even mention anything besides, "I found my roommate murdered." She doesn't even say her name. She doesn't say, "I can't believe this happened. She was so nice. I can't believe who could have done this. I'm so worried. I can't believe it. She was so wonderful." Normally, if somebody that would pass it in a very violent way, that would be your thought of, "Oh my God, her poor parents," and this and that. No, not from Amanda. She wasn't even concerned at all. She does not even say her name. This exhaustion she feels is, I believe, her replaying this in her mind over and over, and she can't get any sleep. She's exhausted. How can you sleep every moment, every waking moment? And she's with Raphael, who's also going through the same, reliving this every moment and thinking about it every second. So that's why here it is. She's, sending messages to her other boyfriend, and, not telling him much, but expressing her own exhaustion, and poor her, right? She's so exhausted. But this is why. So she's in this fragile state. She's not able to sleep. She's run down. She's stressed out, playing this over and over in her mind, because she wants to confess. Her unconscious wants to confess, but she's holding back, controlling herself and saying, "No, I'm not confessing." So that's why her confession has to come out unconsciously, which it does. So it's in this state of exhaustion and stress and mental prison on the evening of November 3rd, going into the morning of November 4th, that she writes this long email. And this, again, so now I'm going to go into more of how Dr. Hodges deciphers this in what she reveals, her super intel or unconscious reveals in how she wrote this email. So she chose everything to write in here. She was under no pressure. She wasn't doing a book report. There was no journalists asking for anything. This is what she wants them to know. And obviously she wanted this to get out in the press. She wanted to overtake the press that Meredith was just starting to get. Right? I think there was some jealousy here, that Meredith was all over the news, her picture's all over the news. And I think that, being the controlling attention seeker that she was, I think she still had a lot of hatred for Meredith. And she could see that Meredith was in the news, her picture was everywhere. And even though she's dead, that's going to make this woman, Amanda Knox, who appeared to kill her out of jealousy. So imagine, she hated her so much. She killed her. She was so jealous of her. And now she's seeing her all over the news. Everybody's talking about her, right? That's enough to set Amanda off, to say, "No, I want my story out there. How am I going to do this? I can't talk to anyone. The police told me not to talk to anyone. I know what I'll do. I'll email everyone in my address book and say, 'Shh, I've got a story. I tell you some things, but I trust you won't tell anyone, even though I don't know most of you, but I know you just won't tell anyone, right? So here's what happened. Here's what really happened.'" So she was, in her manipulative way, trying to get her story out while acting like, "Well, I didn't think they'd tell anyone." So again, you're seeing her manipulativeness with what she's attempting to do here, either consciously or unconsciously. Either way you look at it, this is the scenario. So again, this is the evening of November 3rd, so it's only the next day, basically, because Meredith's murdered uh, again the November 1st evening, going into November 2nd morning. So here's the very next day, November 3rd evening, going to November 4th morning, and Amanda's like trying to get her, her story out there already. She wants to dominate the media. So in her email, the lack of sleep and pressure she's feeling, it comes out when she writes, "I have to get this off my chest because it's pressing down on me." She's like, get it all out. Get this off her chest. Dr. Hodges writes that in decoding this, it strongly suggests that we're talking about the heavy pressure on her chest could be a flashback to the crime scene and recall how the perpetrators had pulled up Meredith's shirt, exposing her chest, as if to show us we're now exposed to a heavy burden of this murder is on our chests. It's so great that we can barely breathe, just as Meredith would no longer breathe ever again. And Dr. Hodges continues that we would expect, reading this email, that there will be secret references to the crime scene details all throughout her email, because she is going over the crime over and over again. And reading through the negatives, Amanda writes that she wasn't at home the night of the murder, which can be translated as she was at home the night of the murder. So she's confessing to that here in the negative. So her mention of journalists indicates that, telling them, I hope you won't talk to journalists, meaning she really does want them to talk to journalists. So she's challenging journalists to take up her story. And then she writes in the email, "It helps to know that someone besides me knows something and that I'm not the one who knows the most out of everyone." So again, reading through the negative, she's saying, I'm the one that knows the most out of everyone. She couldn't say it any plainer, he says. Given that she has to speak through denial, she knows the most of anyone in this case. Also, when she says someone else besides me knows something, she's hinting that a totally separate person was involved in the crime, pointing strongly to Raphael Selechto. Shortly, she will connect him directly to the killing. Now, in this portion of the email, Amanda describes how Meredith's body was found by the others, and Dr. Hodges points out that the way Amanda tells the story of finding Meredith's body, she's reenacting the murder. And she indicates this with her super intel or unconscious, with the typos that she makes and with the words she omits. So Amanda says here, home immediately while we were waiting, 2 ununiformed police investigators came to our house. I showed them what I could and told them what I knew, gave them Ohone numbers. So she made a typo there with Ohone, and Dr. Hodges goes into that, how she could be saying, oh, one there, oh, I'm the one. It's one way to interpret that. You can interpret these things in multiple ways, whatever makes the most sense, or in multiple ways that the unconscious is getting the message out. So that's one example. And as she said, she explained in broken Italian. And then she describes how Philomena arrived with her boyfriend, Marco F. So the fact that Amanda would use Marco F, Dr. Hodges feels there's signals in that as well. And 2 other friends of hers. Altogether, we checked the how out. She made a typo with house and left the S out, so it could look like ho out. Check the ho out. Talked to the poli. Another typo, poli instead of police. Again, indicative of a message of lying to the police, poli, and in a big space, Amanda actually omitted a word here. She said, in a big, they all opened Meredith's door. Okay. So this is also a message, an unconscious message, fact that he completely blanked on a word. Said, oh, in a big, they all opened Meredith's door. So he thinks the word she was looking for was in a big push or a big shove. And Dr. Hodges is saying because she's still in that prison mind of the prison and she's still reliving it, she can't even bring herself to remember how she pushed and shoved Meredith. It was too triggering for her. So she just blanked on it when she was writing to even write the word. She couldn't even write the word. And again, this is about 24 hours after the crime. But anyways, so Philomena arriving with her boyfriend and a couple other people, they all got together. They came into the house and they pushed, although Amanda blanked on the word, they pushed open Meredith's door to find her. And then Philomena screamed. And Dr. Hodges says she's describing the scenario this way because this is how the murder happened. He is getting from this and other analyzing her emails that's what happened the night. He's saying that Amanda and Raphael and Rudy Gaudet came into the house together and they barged into Meredith's room. They pushed into her room to attack her. So it wasn't a case of they were talking first and going back and forth and then things escalated. Instead, the way she describes this and from other indications in her email, it shows Dr. Hodges believes she's describing the scenario of how the attack began, which was the three of them barging into her room. And then the scream of Philomena would be the scream that Meredith gave when Amanda stabbed her on the side. She made a big gash on the side of her neck, which is also confirmed in the email through these tells. And skipping ahead, Dr. Hodges describes how the way Amanda describes the unfolding of events, especially using Marco F. He talks about how Marco can be akin to Marco Polo, the game, where one person is blindfolded or has their eyes closed and they have to search around for someone. And you say Marco Polo. And so she claims this was a game that she was playing with the police, who she is symbolically saying we're blind. They couldn't see who the real murderer was. And she's saying it's me unconsciously. And also describing the scene of Meredith's body being found with Philomena and her boyfriend and friends knocking the door down. That suggests the order of the three sexual attacks. Starting, Amanda was suggesting the sexual attack on Meredith with her boyfriend Raphael and Rudy, and that it was a sadistic game, and that's where he brings in the Marco Polo, and that note again the assault team of all three are arriving together at her house by plan. Rudy was clearly invited to the group gathering and has already been convicted of the crime. For the record, Amanda also clearly identifies Raphael as accompanying her at a violent party. She also alludes to the sadistic sexual attack in the phrase of her email when she wrote, "Altogether, we checked the how out, talked to the poli." So in a revealing slip, she suggests the suspected three perpetrators altogether checked the how or ho out. Vividly, she suggests a three-way sexual assault prior to the murder. She says it in yet another way. They all opened Meredith's door when she heard Philomena's scream. So like I said, he writes that this further suggests they initially entered Meredith's bedroom together like stormtroopers, her and Raphael and Rudy. to carry out maximum humiliation. This never started out as a one-on-one catfight. Amanda's super intel makes it clear it was a sudden group sexual assault. The remainder of this email will give Amanda ample opportunity to confirm it. So he's not just going on this, he's going on the entire email and other things that he's going to get into later in the book. Then he goes to the line, another typo she had, instead of writing and, she wrote A-N-D in a big blank. They all opened Meredith's door. So again, that word omitted. In this way, she confesses that her crime was all too much for her to face. It was so overwhelming that she temporarily disassociated and checked out mentally. She blanked out and could not say the aggressive word push or shove, really something much stronger when it came to, quote, a big blank opened Meredith's. It was too close to the awful moment when she opened Meredith's throat and neck with a sharp knife. She suggests the missing words are, in a big thrusting stab, I opened Meredith up. It perfectly matches the crime scene and the horrific open wound on the left side of Meredith's neck, a wound that prosecutor Manini called the worst he'd ever seen. Amanda suggests again that all three perpetrators stabbed Meredith, but she, Amanda, was the one who cut her open in a vicious stabbing. Amanda was the angriest, fact that she will later reveal. No wonder this is the single most chaotic moment in the email. Like nowhere else, she makes 5 crucial slips precisely explaining the chaos. Amanda knew exactly what they would find, Meredith's dead body with a gaping stab wound to her throat. And one last sentence, she stab wound to the throat is significant because of this stab wound to the throat. It was so horrible to look at while cleaning up the crime scene. Amanda couldn't bear to look at it, so she covered Meredith with the comforter or the duvet so that she wouldn't have to look at it. So this was, he believes why he is referring to it, this opening of Meredith opening her throat as she did.